Hello and welcome back to the Sleepless Podcast, where I interview people that are much more qualified in just about everything compared to me. And another huge guest here today. I am very, very excited about this one. Going to go through the resume. 2014 Clinton Grimes Rising Star Award winner. 2019 Best Feature Writer. Co-host of the round so far with Kane Cornes. The AFL Exchange podcast with Cal Toomey and Riley Beveridge. The feature columnist for the AFL, Mitch Cleary.
Jarryd, thanks for having me. You say overqualified. I've got the iPhone headphones in. You've got the full podcast set up at the moment, mate. So you got me covered at the moment.
Not too much. I mean, Zoom obviously makes it a bit hard. We're just still in that last bit of lockdown now. But if we had you in, we would have had the full mic set up and everything like that.
No, I saw the photos. It looks like a nice little setup, and great to see you got your own podcast up and running, mate. It's great to see people getting involved in this sort of thing.
Thank you, mate. I'm very excited about this one purely because you've kind of got my dream job of being an AFL journalist. And just like a journalist in general, it is an awesome job. I've had this dream. Anyone that knows me knows that I've been wanting to do this for a very, very long time.
No, mate, it's pretty lucky to say we get to do what we do. And, it's with you and I speaking in February, and we're still pretty busy at the moment. So it's pretty funny. It's something you sign up for and you sort of don't get your head around it properly, that it's you think it might be a March to September thing, but some of the times outside of the season are just as busy for us, if not busier. So it's a full commitment, but I love it, and it's good that you can string two words together, mate. You're on the right path.
I was going to say, I've got your Twitter notifications on, and I see all the stories that you break, and like it's almost more like even busier around this time than any other time, like around like trade period and stuff like that. Like you are very, very busy around those times.
Oh, the trade period's nuts, and the numbers, like the people listening and the consumers, are through the roof. And I remember, what am I, 27 now? When I started at Croc Media when I was 19, 20 on trade radio, it was just basically a couple of guys in the studio talking a bit of stuff about trades. And now we've got the full social media component. There's TV streams, there's online, there's blogs about it. Every club's involved. Clubs are running their own media, online content for it. So it's out of control, but it just shows the thirst for it. And it's great that the punters, feel like they're getting something out of it. And I reckon that just on the trade, I could talk about it for hours. So stop me when you want. But I feel that the fans and the consumers are actually a lot more educated than they were sort of 3, 4, 5 years ago. Like people know what a restricted free agent is now. They know how the delisted free agency system works. So it's quite insightful when we get to talk to people who actually know what they're talking about.
Yeah, I do love trade radio. Every single time, like that's every day on just sort of the laptop when I'm doing whatever. I just got it on in the background, and I absolutely love it. It is unreal.
Yeah, it's a pretty cool setup, and getting asked to talk crap about trades each day is probably every AFL footy fan nuffy's dream, because I see the comments and the stuff on Facebook and Twitter and Insta, and seems like everyone's an expert in list management at that time of the year.
I was going to say, you'd get some good sort of insider info from people that think they know absolutely everything, but
mate, we were at February now. I'm just getting over those 17-way trades that people come up with, that we cop in October and November, but it's all right. Keep them coming. It's all good content.
Just the Paddy Cripps for 7 first rounders all the way up to 2028 or something like that.
Yeah.
We'll touch more on that sort of stuff later, but I want to go sort of early life for you, at least. You were a Geelong boy originally, weren't you?
Yes, massive Cats fan, and I actually last year in lockdown dug up some photos of me being a full nuff in the Cats outfit, and photo with Jimmy Bartell, who I've been lucky enough to work a lot with, and standing over the fence looking at Gary Ablett, and
I've seen them on the Instagram.
Being able to, so check out the Instagram if you want to see me embarrass myself as a kid. But that's where the love for footy started, and I quickly realised I wasn't going to make it as a player, so I be able to go to the footy and cover it, and get to be immersed in the footy industry, and now I'm lucky enough to say I can do so.
Yeah, that's the dream, sort of being able to go all the way through, and then sort of obviously, like you said, meet sort of your heroes like Jimmy Bartell, where you can start working with them, and and really up close and personal.
Yeah, absolutely. And pretty crazy to think Gary Ablett's now retired. It makes me feel old. But I think that a lot of footy journos, like, there's this whole thing about no one really wants to announce who they go for. I'm happy to say I'm a Cats fan, but it's died off a little bit. But everyone who covers the game had a passion somewhere and started somewhere. So I think that's where the underlying love for the game begins, and people carry on from there. So if someone tells you ever, Jarryd, that they don't support a team, they're lying to you.
Oh, always. Every time anyone says that, they've got like a special spot for somewhere at least.
Yeah. Who's your team?
I'm St Kilda.
Okay.
Yeah. So basically, I hate Geelong. Is basically how I want to say it.
Yeah. Well, I remember getting in arguments with St Kilda fans after that 2010 qualifying final. You would have been probably still a young tacker at that point, but 2010. I don't know if you recall the game or have seen highlights when
Cameron Ling,
they'd kick the winner. Yeah.
I was at the game. At the game.
And St Kilda fans getting stuck into a bay of Geelong fans. I'll never forget that. So you reckon you hate Cats fans? I've still got it in for Saints fans from that night.
I remember. So I was sitting probably level 2 maybe at Etihad or whatever it was called, the Telstra Dome, and I was sitting level 2 and they just kicked the goal. Everyone around me is absolutely in almost tears, and I hear some guy behind me who's got the earplugs in, listening to the radio, going, "They've called it back! They've called it back!" And I'm standing up, like 8-year-old me, standing up, going, "Like, it's okay, like it's coming back."
Yeah.
I cried in 2009 as well.
Yeah, did you get to go?
No, I didn't get to go to the granny, but I went to the prelim before it, and I cried when we won. So
yeah. Oh, that 09 was out of control, but I still think you should have won 2010. But that's probably another pod for a whole another day.
I could talk about that 2010 grand final for hours upon end.
Yeah.
So you went to St Joseph's College, and I was saying to you before that you're the first sort of non-athlete that I've had on, but that's actually completely not true. You've played first 11 cricket and first 18 footy at St Joseph's College.
Yeah, I think you looked at my LinkedIn. The first 18 footy was a bit of a stretch. I've only played a game or two, so it's good to have on the resume. But
counts.
I was able to say I played a lot of under-18s footy up until I was about 19, and then work got in the way, and then loved cricket until I think Ashton Agar hit me for 20 off and over in a school cricket final in year 12, and I realised that I wasn't going to. I think he made 98 for Australia the following in the subsequent 12 months when he made his debut. So that's not. I guess it's not too shameful, but that was the peak of my sporting ability, and I haven't done a great deal since.
That's all right. I mean, that's better than a lot of other blokes. I am not exactly a fantastic footballer. I'll be the first to admit that. So you've done better than that at least.
Well, you're going to make a career for yourself off it, mate. So stick to that.
Let's absolutely hope so. After St Joseph's College, you began studying at Deakin Uni, which is where I'm going as well, which we sort of spoke about a little bit. You did an arts and commerce course.
Yeah, I still haven't finished it. So I hope there's no lecturers will hear this or listen to this. But so I finished. Well, I was taking a step back during year 11 and 12 at school. I was working part time for the Geelong Addy. So a day or two, sort of after school on weekends, covering the GFL. So funny story. Year 10, my first game covering the GFL was North Shore v Lara. Lara had a 16-year-old kid debut that day by the name of Devon Smith. He kicked 4 goals. And North Shore was coached by Peter Riccardi, and that was just the dream for me, getting to interview Peter Riccardi. So I was 16 covering that league, and then sort of did a bit more as I was through year 11 and 12, and then did it sort of on a bit more of a regular basis first year out of school, and then got an internship at Croc Media in that first year out of high school at St Joey's, and that was while I was combining with uni, and tried it for a little bit to keep it going. And I'm not saying by any stretch to leave your degree, but it was just, I had a full-time job. I got offered a full-time job in what was my second year of uni, so 2 years out of school, and it just made sense to go back to part-time. So I was chipping away at it for a little while. Haven't done it much recently, but it's still there. And funnily enough, I was a big fan of the finance and the accounting and the number crunching. So it actually, not that I've ever went anywhere with the degree, but it actually helps when talking about salary caps and TPP and, when you're talking about players taking salary cuts and all these sort of things we're all now talking about. So I guess it comes in handy.
Yeah, I was going to say, did any of that sort of course help you in the future? And obviously that be a one way of it helping.
Yeah, for sure. And I think just with everyday life as well. But the journalism first couple of years was a good foundation, but there's no substitute for what you learn on the road and working with some great mentors and being inside newsrooms at that age. Just being a sponge was pretty epic. So I got a pretty good thrown into the deep end, I guess, at that age and got a pretty good understanding of how it all works.
Yeah. You spoke about the Geelong Advertiser before, and I've got here that you were there. How did were there any particular stories other than obviously that Devon Smith one and the Peter Riccardi? Were there any sort of stories that kind of stood out that made you kind of want to go, I want to do this always, I want to keep doing this sort of thing?
Yeah, I've always been from as young as I can remember, go buy the paper or read the big journos and see the newsbreakers on the footy show and whatever. And even at 16, 17, to think that I was trying to break coaching sackings and that sort of thing, which is still in the AFL, coach sackings are as big as they come. A coach losing their job is as big a story as there is. I'm trying to break coach sackings at local footy level when you're arguing with presidents and trying to get insight from people you know. So all those sort of things stood out. This is the most random story ever. So year out of school, so I just turned 18, I finished school and I did sort of a 3-month thing at the Geelong Addy, a bit more of an internship or a bit more permanent work. And Schoolies was on. So this is 2011. I went down, myself and a snapper, a photographer went down in the Geelong Addy crew car. And I thought, how cool is this? I'm going down in the Geelong Addy, the white Camry or whatever it was, get in the car and I'm going to, go down. And the boss at the time just said, go down and get a few Vox Pops with, a few kids and how they're enjoying Schoolies and that sort of thing. And literally the first group I bumped into, they'd been involved in a Toolies incident the night before. One of their mates ended up in hospital, had been assaulted, and it was nuts. It turned out my first front page story for the Geelong Addy was this group of kids who had been involved in this Toolies incident. So just showing up and being in the right place at the right time, I was lucky. But all those moments sort of add up when I look back at my time with the Addy.
I was going to say, that's the definition of getting thrown into the deep end, getting straight into that sort of story.
Yeah. And I've been lucky. A lot of what I've done is sport, but I'm sure you're about to find out with your course and that sort of thing. You've got to have a pretty good range of and be well versed in a range of topics, and that was certainly one of them.
Yeah, absolutely. After the Geelong Advertiser, you ended up working just for News Geelong, just in general. How did that sort of transition from the Geelong Addy into News Geelong as a whole?
Yeah, so that was a show on Channel 31. I think we did it twice a week, so Wednesday and Friday nights. So I was doing all this, selling my peas, trying to work for the Geelong Addy at a similar time. And it was never about money. It was always about, building my resume and trying to get my name out there and building a lot of work. But going out and interviewing people around Geelong for different sports stories and trying to package them up in a news bulletin, almost what you'd see on the 7 or 9 news. Yep. Every night, and then presenting the news. Some of them, don't ever go back and try and find some of this stuff on YouTube. It is around, but just that whole going out, sourcing the interview. So going, ringing someone, can I come and interview? Going interviewing them, learning out how to, where to stand, how to approach them, how to get the best out of someone. Going back, editing it, finding the best news hook. The whole thing it was priceless, really. Yeah. And I was doing it for Channel 31, and my friends and family got to see me on the TV. I was 18, 19. So it was an awesome experience. And Noel Fanning and the guys that I used to work with definitely taught me a lot as to to what was involved in the whole process.
Yeah. We spoke with the Addy before about like your most famous sort of thing. Was there anything that happened at News Geelong that sort of sticks out in particular for you, or any couple of memories?
So I remember I interviewed Murali, which was pretty cool. He was playing for the Melbourne Renegades in the early Big Bash.
Yeah.
And they had a trial game in Geelong, and there sort of wasn't any crews around. Like, this is, one of the greatest bowlers of all time, and I'm just interviewing him just on a camera for Channel 3. Like, that was pretty cool. The Boomers came to Geelong, interviewing Aaron Finch was a big Geelong name. I used to go to Chris Scott press conferences, and we used to go in and every now and again to the Cats. So all that was like, Geelong is just like the best, because it's small enough that you get an opportunity and there's local sport and stuff, but they've still got that professional footy team, and they get some big events. So it was an awesome place to learn all this.
Yeah, absolutely. From News Geelong, you then sort of transitioned into a bigger, and it's obviously Croc Media, which is a very well-known sort of entity. You've done so many things with Croc Media as well. So I've just got like a list here of literally everything. Like there's Footy Classified, which literally everyone knows. There isn't a single person that doesn't know Footy Classified, I don't think. There's Future Stars, Trade Radio, Footy WA, This Is Your Sporting Life, all that sort of stuff. What's sort of been the most fun and the most rewarding part of Croc Media, and what sort of program has been for you the most enticing?
Yeah, like Footy Classified, being thrown out on the road. My brief for Footy Classified was, go and get a grab for the show each night at 9:30 that no one else has got. So being 19, the hardest thing was not having any contact. So I'm trying to ring and rock up to training or rock up to the scans to try and find injuries, with no, I've been working in Geelong for a year really, and I'm thrown in the deep end, and then the hardest thing was if 7, 9 or 10 Fox ABC had to get it, it would basically become redundant because it'd run on the 5 or 6 o'clock news, and I've got to try and get something that holds that we can promote for Footy Classified at 9:30. So that was like, and it wasn't every night you need to come back with something. There was a lot of times we didn't even turn the camera on because you'd be waiting for an injury or waiting for something to happen that never did. But some of those rewarding days where you might be waiting 5 or 6 hours for an injury, and the player walks in and they stop for a chat, and you get this one-on-one with whoever it might be. They're some of the most rewarding days. And, with COVID now, like the doorstops, who knows where it goes. Like, I don't want to sound like one of those guys, back in my day, but like it was funny, like, waiting out there in the cold in the middle of July for people, trying to convince them to talk to you was a skill in itself. And then that was Footy Classified. Then did a lot of producing. So I worked with Terry Wallace and Tony Leonard on a show called Sports Day, which was awesome. Did that for a couple of years, and learning how to source guests and write a rundown for a radio show, something I'd never done. Guys like the name of Jack Heverin, Cameron Luke, Tristan Fenner, these names are guys that work in industry now. Were like big brothers and mentors for me. I was 18, 19, and these guys were all in their sort of mid to late 20s, and I was trying to learn off them. And then I had Hutchie, who ran Croc Media and still does. It's now called Sports Entertainment Network. And Damien Barrett was my closest mentor and all of that. And then from there, I got the opportunity on 3AW's Sports Day show with Jarryd Healy and Dwayne Russell, which is probably the premier nightly sports show in Melbourne, 6 o'clock each night. And again, that was similar. The brief from Jarryd Healy was, when you come on the radio at 6:30 every night, you've got to tell people driving home in their cars something they didn't know when they got in their car. So that was, a skill and another thing to learn and try and source information. But it was, it's awesome. Sorry, I'm getting all nostalgic here thinking back. Yeah.
I'm just getting like starstruck. Some of the names that you're saying are just like, oh.
Sorry, I shouldn't drop them.
No, that is like unbelievable. Like just hearing like the people that you've been able to work with that, like I just watch them on TV and I listen to them on the radio and stuff like that. It's awesome. And I'm assuming it'd be the same with you as well. Who sort of has been the person that you've been most excited to work with when like you sort of heard that you were going to start doing something with someone? What kind of made you go like, oh?
Well, as a guy who loved news, like Damien Barrett was, on the Footy Show, the big newsbreaker, and is is the best footy journo right now and one of the most respected voices in footy still to this day. And to be able to say I've still got a relationship with him and work with him every day is pretty cool. I don't know. Like, it's funny, like Kane, a lot of people ask about Kane Cornes, and I still remember like when Kane was, what's he been retired for probably 4 or 5 years now. So I was working at Croc Media on a show called Footy SA, I think you just mentioned, as a producer. So that was a show we filmed in Melbourne before the Sunday Footy Show, like used the same sort of set. And then so after the Sunday Footy Show, WA would get Footy WA, Victoria would get Future Stars, and SA would get Footy SA. And Kane had just retired, and he was pretty much on the panel. So like when he sort of his first foray into the media, and working with him right through and being able to host a show with him now is pretty cool. So he puts a few noses out of joint, Kane, but he loves it, and at least he tells it how it is, which is probably, you could argue, a lot of people in the industry don't do enough of.
I was gonna touch on Kane, but I was gonna be like, being able to, like, with Kane and his opinions, he's sort of very well known for his sometimes controversial opinions.
Yeah, he is. But like, people just say, I think Kane will sit down and watch the footy and just want to like shoot his mouth off or whatever. It's not that at all. He would consume more than anyone I know. He would be texting at 6:30 in the morning when his radio show's on. He'll be, I might even check my phone after this, and he might have a message. Like his screen time on his phone would be out of control. He reads everything. He's the biggest consumer on Twitter that I know. He watches everything. Like, one thing to say that he's just an opinion guy, but he definitely he's very creative as well. Like, he writes columns for the Adelaide Advertiser. Yep. Just his thinking on the game is really good. So I'm one of Kane's biggest fans, obviously, but I think he's an absolute jet.
Yeah, and I've still got respect, obviously, for Kane, and like a lot of things he says, like there's things I don't agree with, because like they're always going to be, but I actually think he's not a bad. He's pretty good in terms of how he's like able to give his opinion and sort of back it up with reason and info, and actually sort of work behind it. Yeah,
and got a hand, like, he says things other people think of, and good on him. He's played 300 games. He's played an AFL Premiership. He's pretty well credentialed.
I think he deserves it.
Yeah.
We touched on sort of the opinions. Has there ever been a time on any of the shows or anything you've worked on where there's sort of been like a serious clash of like opinions, or something where it's like you really don't agree with something that someone else has said, or some story that's come out where you're like, that's definitely wrong, or anything like that?
It's a good question. I'm just trying to think. Like, we would have had some heated arguments on Trade Radio.
Yep.
With co-hosts. The AFL Exchange podcast, I know it's a light-hearted thing, but there's been times we've walked out of that studio and, you might be just a little bit edgy with one another, but a little bit. But I don't know. The thing that I've always been taught is, like, I'm here to present the news. So I'm not sort of like, Kane's played the game. He's got the credentials. I'm just here to tell people stuff that they don't know. So in terms of the hard opinion, I'm sort of slowly, we'll hopefully get there one day, but you got to have the runs on the board first. And, you got to, be able to do a bit first before you can start having those hard hitting opinions, I reckon.
I think you do certainly have runs on the board by now. You are one of the more respected footy journalists I know of anyway. How does it sort of work in terms of when you're breaking a story and then being able to like publish it and put it out? Like, how do you sort of go from what's like the early days of trying to find out a story and then the very end product where you end up releasing it to AFL.com or your Twitter or something like that?
So you mean like how, like what it was like then compared to now, or how I've like learned how to develop it?
Yeah, sort of like how you've learned how to find new sources and find different stuff like that, and what you do to end up releasing it out.
Well, it's about, like, I find the biggest thing is building trust with people. So, when I was starting out, you don't know anyone. So you try and meet up with people for coffees, you go to training, you try and chat to as many people as you can, and you're slowly trying to, eke out information out of them, really. You got to have enough people that will tell you stuff that aren't going to tell anyone else at the end of the day. So it's still frustrating. Like some of the best people you build contacts with, and you feel like you're getting close with, might leave the industry or lose their job or move to another club, and their whole role changes. So things like that. But you're constantly trying to meet new people and get in their ears as to what's going on. But it's a slow burn. Like, I still remember when I was 19, trying to work on the footy show with Damo, and he'd be trying to chase a big story, and I'm trying to ring people to help him. People ringing me, people answering, going, why would I tell you? Because he's the one about to go on the show and present it, and he's the one that I've got a 20-year relationship with. Why am I going to tell this kid that's been in the industry for 5 minutes? So, it takes time, but every conversation you have, I guess, leads somewhere down the line.
Yeah. Is there like is it common for there to be a lot of sort of pushback from players, like when you ask them about things? Like, obviously there's stories that are a lot more intense that they might not want to talk about, but is it common for them to sort of be like, not tell you and kind of not get angry, but like just tell you to just piss off almost, sort of thing?
There's times that happens, but it's more or less they'll just talk around it and not answer it. Like you might ask a question about an injury or something, and they'll just talk around it and not even go into specifics, which is fine. Like you get that. If you sit down and watch a coach press conference, and you'll hear people asking pretty direct questions, and you can tell when a coach is trying to wriggle out of it, which is their prerogative. But we've got a job to do and ask the questions, and you can only ask. So that gets back to having that respect and having a relationship with people, because the more you know someone and the more comfortable they feel around you, is the more chance, in my view, that they're going to hopefully open up and tell you something.
When you're writing like the big stories that get on the features and everything, do you sort of contact the people that you're writing the stories about and sort of let them know that you are doing it, or do you sort of like just let them see it first, or what do you think?
Yeah, I think you try and make the calls where you can. If it's about a player, like a lot of journos don't have direct lines with the players. Like we always joke, like, take me back to 1995 when you could just ring a player. But there's protocols in place now. You can't, most players, you can't just ring them direct, which is fair. They're professionals, and there's managers at the clubs, and they've got their personal player managers, and there's media communications people involved. But if you're writing something strong enough on something, you can often put a request in to speak to that person, or get in touch to get their sort of opinion, because it's only fair that if you're writing something strong about someone, that they can have an awareness of it, or at least you can do your best to get in touch with them.
Yeah. Being sort of one of the top columnists in the whole AFL industry, you've obviously written some massive stories. I've got sort of a list here of some of your top stories. You just broke one actually today about Rowan Marshall, which broke my heart, to be completely honest with you. That hurt a little bit.
Yeah. Oh, that is an interesting story, because Paddy Ryder's another year older. The quarters are going to 20 minutes. Paddy Ryder was huge last year, and I actually probably underestimated him, but the quarters were shorter, and Marshall was in the ruck. Like, I'm fascinated to see what they do in round one, and he's probably going to miss the first 4 to 6 weeks, Rowan Marshall. So with quarters back to 20 minutes, Paddy Ryder, what is he now? 32, 33. He can't cover the turf as well as he would have liked. They're going to need some other support. So whether that's a Sean McKernan or whatever. But anyway, the whole machinations around St Kilda is pretty big, because Rowan Marshall had been having a pretty good preseason up to this point, and he's only been a full-time ruck for 3 years now, and I would have been keen to see how he goes. It's a tough one, because you could just about pencil him in for 22 games, and it's one of those positions the Saints weren't even going to have to worry about, and now it's might become a bit of a headache for him.
Yeah, that really hurt when I saw that. I was like, I get to speak to you tonight, and I have to just face the fact that you've broken a story about probably my favourite player on the Saints, which hurts a lot. What do you think has been I've got like the list here. What do you think has been your biggest story that you've ever broken? Like, what has sort of garnered the most attention, do you think?
It's a good question. Well, still one of my favourite stories was when Dustin Martin toured Greater Western Sydney, and we got shots of him in a hard hat. So this is 2013. Footy show flew me up to Sydney. We got a tip that Dusty was going to meet with the Giants. So he was on the periphery of the Richmond side at that point. Yeah. Like he was a gun, but there'd been a bit of talk that he was going to explore his options. And we got shots of Dusty in like an orange fluoro jacket in a hard hat, walking around this Giants facility that's not even built. It's built now. Yeah. And he's with Leon Cameron, Stephen Silvani, the list boss at the time, Dave Matthews, the CEO, who's still the CEO, Gubby Allen, the head of footy. And we're standing on the we had two camos on this thing. Like this is the resources of the footy show. I was on the ground level and we had a camo there's like a 5-story car park next door to the Giants facility. And he was on the top like a sniper, shooting his camera down. We got these amazing shots of Dusty and just the whole thrill of that coming off was pretty cool when I think back about it. But I don't know. Some of the best stories, in my opinion, are the quirky ones. Like I don't know if you remember, like Braden Sire.
I've got that written here as one of the funniest ones.
Yeah, like it's not changing the world, but you know, the club lied. Well, he lied to the club about that.
Yeah.
And then proving right that a player's going to play under that name, fill in and play a game, like just bizarre. Who'd ever think that would happen? They're the ones meant to about. Oh, you never want to reveal your sources, Jarryd.
Of course.
Just a mate of a mate of a mate. So yeah. These things, some of the best stories come about in the quirkiest ways. You can have the best contacts with people at clubs, but you know, people often find a way to tell you.
that is a very random like story, and you wouldn't hear about that in sort of any other sport. I wouldn't think, where like you'd play in like a different league and a different whatever. Like I feel like you wouldn't hear about that anywhere except for AFL almost.
Yep. There's a few random NRL ones, but the AFL, yeah, they'll throw up random things from time to
time. You had the one last year that you don't have to touch on, obviously, if you don't want to, but the whole Brooke Cochin situation that happened. If you can explain sort of what happened with that to the listeners and everything.
Yeah, so I've touched on it a fair bit, and we did an AFL Exchange podcast on it. Basically, I tweeted something that I shouldn't have. I wasn't aware of our editorial process at the time, and learned a lot from that. So, you're always constantly learning. So, realizing I needed to ask more questions before I publish stuff. And, that was a big learning curve in my career. And, something now that I'll always look back on as to, the need to ask more questions and be aligned with where the editorial status of the business was at the time, because they'd made a call. I didn't obey that. And, I went from there. Yeah.
You got stood down and then reinstated after there was kind of this public backlash of you getting stood down. Everyone was very much on your side, and everyone I know is definitely still on your side with all that. Had the Cochins like contacted you at all, or like said anything to you in particular, or just anything?
No, I was actually blown away by that support, because usually the media is meant to hate journos, aren't they? So. I didn't really have. I had like contact with the AFL and Richmond, obviously, but no. That's it. They're getting back to the whole, direct line to the players. You deal with, people at clubs and people at the AFL. So no, none of that. But no, we've moved on to brighter times from them, and no, I've learned a lot since that.
They didn't suffer too much from it. They ended up winning the bloody premiership, so obviously that's fine.
The Tigers went through a lot. The Tigers went through a lot last year, and they're going to be ominous again this year. So
yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
I started this last week with my last guest, Steph Chochi. We did the predictions for the year coming up. And so I'm going to try and put you on a bit on the spot here and see sort of your predictions for the 2021 season. We'll start with the big one, obviously, the Premiership. Who do you think is going to be the team?
I reckon Port. Only because, I know, Richmond's just an obvious one. And Port, their growth, they don't really lose anyone from last year's side. They've got a few young kids that are only going to get better, I reckon. And they've got a couple of kids we haven't really seen, like Miles Bergman. Is a kid to keep an eye on who might break into that team. Tom Marshall's going to get better. They've got a Lear now who can play tall in defence and probably a spot they needed filling. Lysett, is there. Laddams is going to get better. So George Yardies is going to be a jet. So I don't know. I'm pretty bullish about Port, and I think they're right in the window. As long as like Gray and Boat can stand up, because they're still pretty important players, and they're on the other side of 30 obviously now. So we'll go with Port.
Yeah, I said in the last podcast that the Cats were going to win it because I think the window is probably wide open, and I think the addition of Jezza Cameron Higgins is going to be huge. And I know there's been sort of talk that they're a bit too old, or whatever, but I think they're right in that sort of perfect age where they might do it. I reckon Paddy Dangerfield's going to get it.
Yeah, well, I've just done an interview with Chris Scott that's online. It'll be on the line in the morning, actually, on afl.com.au. Well, we're speaking. People won't have probably heard this, but they're obviously Cats are bullish that it's not, the next. I personally think it's next 2 years, or it's not, because Dangerfield, Selwood, Hawkins, they're all in that window.
Yep.
And by bringing in Higgins and Smith, it's going to rob game time into these young kids. But good on them, they've gone for it, and if they can get another flag in this window, it'll be a phenomenal record after 2007. I think they've only missed the finals once since 2007, so it's a pretty good record.
Very good. I actually, and you said Port was going to be the Premiership. I actually had them as the team that was going to fall this year. I had them as the team that was going to go down purely because I think they had a lot of what happened with them last year was they had the fans behind them as well, and I had this thing where I reckon they played so well because they had sort of the most support, and like a lot of teams that had their home games in the Gold Coast and in the hubs and that didn't have the fans with them, so I think they kind of overperformed last year, and so I don't
mind that theory.
Yeah, I don't think they'll fall dramatically. Like, I don't think they'll be terrible, but I think they just won't be anywhere near as good as they were last year.
All right, let's see who's got the last laugh.
We'll see how we go there. I've got the Brownlow. Any early picks for that? Obviously, it's very early before the season's even started, but
yeah, I actually haven't I reckon from December, January, I'm like, yeah, Port's going to be my premiership tip. Brownlow, I actually haven't got one. Neil's going to be hard to top again because he's so good in that midfield. I'm trying to think of one that sort of is a little bit left field. What about and I'm not just saying this because you're a Saints man, like a Jack Steele. Usually players take like that 12 months to get noticed and get their name on the radar. Yeah. I can't remember how well he polled last year, but
fourth.
He was
third or fourth.
Was he fourth? Maybe? Yeah, that's pretty good. Maybe. That's pretty good for a bloke that not many people, the general footy fan may not have heard of 12 months ago.
Yeah.
Now he's co-captain. He's going to shake their hand before the toss, so the umpires might get to know him a bit more this year.
That would be very nice. I didn't go left field at all, and I went Neil because I just think I think he's a gun, and I think extending the quarters out and playing more games of footy is only going to help him. So I reckon he'll take it out again.
He's coming off a calf injury, but he'll be fine. He's he's a gun around stoppages, so it doesn't need to run too much.
No, that's fine. I spoke before about the falls and the rises. Who do you think is going to rise up the table a fair bit and play a lot better, and who do you think is going to fall a fair bit?
I really like where Freo's going with their young group.
Yep.
I don't know if they make the 8, but I think they're in that next sort of wave. The Dogs, they finished 8th and lost to the Saints. So I think the Dogs will be pushing on that top 4 this year, that midfield and that sort of thing. I think Steph Martin's a pretty good pickup for them. If he can just provide something more than what they've had. As for the falls, who made the I'm just trying to think. Collingwood, that might sound a bit harsh, but they haven't really gone and rectified that key target and attack. Grundy will have a better year, but yeah, I'm just a bit wary on the Pies. And Tay Adams had a hammy. Pendle's another old arc. I don't think he's going to fall off yet, but that midfield is a little bit, aging. So let's see.
So I said, obviously, the Falls I had Port, which I said before, but I had the Risers as the Suns because I think Gold Coast is going to just go through the roof this year as well. Yeah,
big year for them. Bit of pressure on Stewie Jew, like he's been there 3 years now.
Yeah.
Entering his 4th year, I reckon.
Yeah.
Just need to show a bit because they just drop away in the back end of years.
Yeah. I just think I didn't realise that Real and Rankin hadn't played with each other yet, and it kind of only the other day they hadn't, and I was like, that'll be a fun pairing to put on a footy team.
Yeah. I don't know. I love Rankin, but this might be harsh. He's only a second-year player, but his back half of last year annoyed me a little bit, just with all his tricks and stuff. He was almost trying to get a bit too tricky.
Yeah.
But he's a Jet, so full preseason under his belt. I read something the other day. One of our Queensland reporters, Michael Whiting, writing that he might move into the midfield. I just think I've just got this thing about footballers like Callum Mills. This whole thing about him being a defender, moving into the midfield. Yeah. I just think. If that's where they are, like Sam Doherty's a gun halfback, leave him there.
Yeah.
If Callum Mills is a good halfback, leave him there. I just think Rankin is going to win you more games as a forward than a midfielder, so leave him there. That's my view.
And I think Gold Coast midfield is kind of, not that it's like stack, but I think it's good enough to be without Rankin in that midfield as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's not going to be many better small forwards in the comp, so I reckon leave him there.
Absolutely. What's sort of next for you? In terms of everything, are there any more sort of programs or any shows that are coming out that are sort of next for you, or are you just sticking with what you've got at the moment and everything like that?
So I do ABC radio on Sundays. So I didn't get too much of that last year because the games weren't in Melbourne, but do the boundary on the ABC. So looking forward to getting involved in that again this year and all that. So that's the only really thing that will change from last year for me. And then obviously the AFL Exchange podcast goes around again and around so far with Kane. And then, just the stories during the week. So it's pretty much all systems go from here.
Sounds awesome. I'm very much looking forward to it. Thank you so much for coming on. This has been awesome for me, especially just having sort of someone that I want to be you basically. So this has been an awesome experience for me.
Oh, thanks, Jarryd. You're already better looking than me, mate. So you've got me covered there. So look forward to it, and hopefully, who knows, the way the media's going, this little home podcast studio you've got could become the norm. So keep at it.
COVID did wonders for me, I think. So thank you so much for coming on. This has been awesome. Cheers.
Thanks for having me.